This session is titled Non-Tariff Measures on Key Food Commodities and is organized by the Orient Integrated Development Consultants, Incorporated. To begin this session, I now give the floor to Dr. Arlene D. Inocencio, the Dean of the De La Salle University School of Economics. Please give her a round of applause.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So I can see a lot of familiar faces, friends from the other side. So let me just introduce our session. So non-tariff measures, for those who are already familiar, bear with me for the next minute. For those who are yet to properly understand NTMs, I suppose that this should serve as a good introduction to NTMs. So they are implicit barriers in international trade. While tariffs are taxes you pay on imported goods, NTMs don't involve direct taxes, but they still make it harder for goods to cross borders. NTMs are all the rules, regulations, and standards that countries impose to ensure that the stuff coming in is safe, healthy, and won't harm their respective industries. These measures can include quality checks, safety standards, licensing requirements, and even the way products are labeled and packaged. For economists, NTMs are a big deal because they can potentially slow down trade and make it more expensive. Economists study NTMs to understand how they affect trade flows, prices, and the overall economic well-being of countries. In a nutshell, NTMs are the less obvious non-tax obstacles to goods face when trying to cross international borders. So this session will present the results of the assessment of non-tariff measures on swine and chicken meat and fish. The assessment includes construction of a stringency index or restrictiveness index of NTMs, estimation of welfare impacts of NTM adjustments, results of regulatory impact assessment, and some policy action or recommendations. So today's main speaker is Dr. Cesar Cororaton, who is very familiar to many of you. He is now a scientist in residence at the De La Salle University School of Economics and a key expert of the Orient Integrated Development Consultants, Incorporated. He is a lifetime member of PES, a recognized economist especially in the areas of trade and agriculture, and one of a handful active CGE modeler in the country. After his presentation, we will have the reactions from government and as represented by the OIC Director for Policy Research Service of the Department of Agriculture, who served as Senior Agriculture Attaché to the WTO for 11 years, Director Jerome Bunye, and the private sector representative, Meat Importers and Traders Association President Emeritus and the founding member, Mr. Jesus Cham. But for now, let me welcome ladies and gentlemen and friends to give us the opening remarks for this session. ASEC Reynaldo Cancho, he is Assistant Secretary for Planning and Policy of NEDA.
Thank you, Dr. Arlene. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm not going to give long remarks. I'm just here to give a brief introduction to the study which NEDA funded and to provide the context. As you know, while NEDA tends to be criticized by some quarters as supporting importation of various food products. I think many in this room recognize, I'm sure I'm preaching to the wrong crowd here, that we are a big supporter of boosting the productivity of our agricultural sector. And we have devoted a whole chapter of the PDP on that, tackling a whole host of issues from that touch on increasing the competitiveness, productivity of agriculture, improving market access, increasing the resiliency of agriculture. Having said that, there's also a separate chapter in the PDP on food security, where we acknowledge that while that's the medium and long-term goal, in the meantime, it's necessary that we complement our local supply by allowing additional supply from overseas. In that context, of course, it's important to reduce restrictions that may prevent us from achieving that objective. I think it's also important to mention that in our view, while we are trying to improve the domestic supply, that's not something we can quickly achieve. Take into account that for a number of the products, especially those that have been studied by the team, the gap between domestic supply and demand is quite significant, ranging from 20+% to about 40%, depending on which product you're looking at. So that's the context within which this study was first formulated. It was actually started, the discussion started in 2021 already in the previous administration. At the time, you will recall that overall inflation was relatively tame, but food inflation started to increase towards the latter part of 2020, and by the first quarter of 2021, it was already reaching 6%. That's partly because of the increase in price of pork. At that time, pork inflation actually reached about 30% by the second quarter of that year. Of course, that's in large part due to the ASF. For that year, we saw a large reduction in pork production by about more than 20%. Fish, which had been a problem already for some time, we also saw an acceleration in inflation reaching double digits by the third quarter. Corn, same thing. We saw an acceleration, in fact, reaching about double digits again by the second half of that year. So the discussions in the economic development cluster at the time among the economic managers started with what can we do in terms of tariffs. So you should remember there was a series of executive orders that came out temporarily reducing the tariffs on various agricultural products. But of course, they also wanted to look at other policy levers that could be used. So that's where the discussions on non-tariff measures came in. And our task that was given to NEDA by the economic managers at the time was to help them understand what might be the implications. Like many policy issues, of course, there may be winners and losers from these policy choices. So our task was to help them better understand what might be the implications of trying to remove or reduce at least these trade-restrictive non-tariff measures. So there was some initial desk work done internally in NEDA. Eventually, that formed the basis for engaging OIDCI for the study that they will be presenting today. Let me just end by saying that because of that background, I think this is one study which I can assure you will not stay on a shelf gathering dust. Now, we have an additional avenue, in fact, for discussing these kinds of issues. There's a new interagency body on inflation and market outlook that was created earlier this year. So this is serving to discuss precisely these types of issues. So we will be feeding the results of this study to that group so we can take action in the coming months. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Now, may I call on Dr. Cesar Corraton to give his presentation.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And then I want to thank PES for giving us time to present these results. And also NEDA for approving us to present this in the public forum. So as discussed or mentioned by Dr. Arlene, so this is a welfare impacts. So consumer welfare impacts of potentially trade-restrictive NTMs on key food items. And then, okay, and then here, acknowledgement, research study commission funded by NEDA, but I need to read this disclaimer. The results are preliminary, viewpoints expressed in this presentation, and any gaps in the analysis are the sole responsibility of the researchers, authors of the study, and not of the funding agency. So the OIDCI won the project, the bid, and then the team, together with me, is Dr. Arlene Inocencio, and then former USEC Herman Onquico, Alex Bautista, and Arlene Capiato. So these are the objectives of the project. Estimate the economic cost of NTMs on 3 commodities: fish, chicken meat, and swine. And then estimate the impact of removing the potentially restrictive NTMs on domestic prices. As discussed a while ago by Dr. Arlene, it affects prices, demand and supply and importation of these commodities, and economic welfare across income groups. Okay, and that's really key. Government revenue, GDP, and then determines which sectors will benefit and lose from the removal of these NTMs. This is the scope of the study. So we reviewed the literature and then the existing similar study on NTMs. And then this is kind of, we developed some tools actually, and hopefully it can be used for further, not only in NTMs, but other policy issues at NEDA. So we develop a CGE model and then conduct scenarios, so many scenarios, and then estimate the impact of changes in NTMs on the 3 commodities. And this one is also very important. We conducted FGDs and KIIs with relevant government agencies and food sector. In fact, we invited Mr. Cham here, one of the people in the private sector which we contact with. And then farmers, food farmers, producers, operators, fisher folk, groups, and traders. And then we developed this index, and hopefully this would be used by other issues as well. So develop stringency or restrictiveness index. And this is really, and the last one is very important, and I learned myself a lot on this regulatory impact assessment. And okay. So to put things in perspective, we're looking at food. So this is the household expenditure share of the 10 household groups in decile. So if you would note, almost 60% of household 1, that's the poorest, is on food, while the household 10 is about 29%. So if you are talking about food, you're talking about the lower income brackets. And this is swine meat, chicken meat expenditure, and you would note the blue bars, that's fish. For the household, the poorest household 1, that's about 8.4%. And then they have 1.8% for chicken meat, and then swine meat about 2%. And compare the shares across household, it's declining. So again, if the 3 commodities are the source of protein, okay, and these are really critical. and then the household, the lower income groups are really sensitive to these commodities. So this is one of the tools that we've developed. It's kind of a lot of things here, but I just want to emphasize that there are two trade barriers that we developed. CGE model is composed of the entire economy, is economy-wide. We made use of the 2018 IO, FIES, and other relevant economic indicators. And the trade barriers here are tariff and NTMs. And the NTMs are estimated by NEDA during the phase 1, and we use it in the analysis. And then which are, in fact, estimated by a gravity model and converted into ad valorem tariff equivalent, so AVE. Okay, so if I say NTM, that's AVE of NTMs as it relates to the economic model. So in the literature, again, on NTM, okay, there's a lot of literature here. It's it's a growing literature in the world, in global trade and agriculture. So you can divide this into three as an additional tax because it's already converted into tariff equivalent, and export tax. And the other component which is really important is the import efficiency. It's like a sand in the wheels. So if you put sand in the wheels, it slows down. It slows down the flow of imports. So part of NTMs are used to adjust the import productivity parameter to capture the speed of the flow of imports. So there are no government revenue implications. So again, as usual CGE model, you put the closure, savings here, and then, since we are focusing on NTMs, okay, one of the tricks in any CGE simulation is forget about the revenue implication because it will have another issues. So the trick here is to fix some of this budget. So what I fix the government budget over GT ratios and have introduced another variable that would close the government account. And then the numerator here is the nominal exchange rate, which is kind of standard in the CGE, but the real exchange rate adjusts to close the government trade account. Real exchange rate is by definition the nominal over the general price index, and the general price index is endogenous. And this is critical. This point is, in any CGE modeling, I've been working on this for several years, you have to check for price endogeneity and the Walras law. So, you know, these are numerical computation. No, and then even if the model will solve, if you don't satisfy this, we'll just give you junk numbers. It's very difficult to, so you need to satisfy these conditions. And changes in welfare is measured in consumer-based, which is the usual EV and the CV measurement. And then and this is also very important. We conducted in-house rating in NEDA, okay, for staff to replicate the results that we generated, and hopefully use the model to simulate other important scenarios. And then after the CGE, we introduced another model, which is a randomized FIES-based poverty microsimulation, the impact on poverty and income. I just want to measure that it uses CGE results, changes in sectoral employment affect employment status of household head through using bootstrapping, and then household income changes as a result of CGE result, changes on sectoral employment, and changes on factor prices, which are wages and non-wages. Now, this is another part of the tool that we developed in this project. So we developed a survey instrument to organize the FGD and KIIs. So we discussed this issue with government agencies and the private sector. And then we made use of the categories of NTMs identified in phase 1 of this. And these are the SPS, which is critical, TBT, pre-inspections, and then trade measures, and so forth. So these are the major categories of NTMs that we considered in the study. So because this is important, there were a lot of critical issues on this kind of index. We have a survey instrument for the private sector and government sector. So in the first column, you have the list of NTMs. There's a lot of them. It's more than, it's a lot of them. I cannot count. And then we identified the factors that are affecting the restrictiveness of NTMs for the private sector is like discriminatory intent, a delay in processing requirements, so on and so forth. And then we have this degree of restrictiveness. We have this, for example, number 2, delay in processing. If it is 15 days, 5, so the higher the number, it's restrictive. For the government side, it's a different instrument. So we have, again, the same list of NTMs, and we have the factors affecting the restrictive NTMs. And for example, factor 1 would be ease of implementation, necessities, and so forth. And we have also the degree of the restrictiveness of these NTMs. So now we have numbers 1 to 5. It's very difficult to follow. So we normalize the index so that it will lie between 0 and 1, and we have this formula. And then I'll just go to the example here. If RI, which is the response, and category 5, for example, and if it says 5 and the minimum is 5, so 4 over 4 is equal to 1, it's very restrictive. And if it is 1, the normalized ratio index is 0, so not restrictive. And then this is a simple average. If you want to compare SPS, under SPS, there's a lot of components, and if you want to average, this is simple average here. So this is how we develop this tool. Now, and then, again, you see a lot of numbers, and then we put them into 3 categories. So if we see 0 and 0.33, that's non-restrictive, and then 0.34, and then 0.67, that's restrictive, and then 0.68, and then between and 1, that's very restrictive. So and here are the results. For swine meat, it's about 0.5, and then private and government, 0.4, but more or less in that vicinity. Chicken meat also. So within the middle range, so restrictive. That's how it would be interpreted. So in this survey, the numbers that go into this table is really coming from the different sectors, the private sectors, fish, swine, and fish, and then the various government agencies. So and this is the numbers that we were able to get. Now, and then this one is actually identified in phase 1 of the study by NEDA. And if you would note, the first column is SPS. So if you would compare the rest, it's really SPS. SPS means sanitary and phytosanitary. And it's critical. That's important because these measures would prevent undesirable commodities, food commodities, to enter the market because they will affect health, human health, animal health, and plant. So this is very critical. So it's necessary. And then, and this is also the phase 1 result, okay, which we made use of. And then, since it's not a complete set, so we also made use of the NTMs estimated by UN. You would note that the UN's estimates are very much higher than the NEDA estimates. And I put in bold numbers the SPS because that's the most significant number of NTMs in the Philippines. So that was the basis of our simulation. Okay, so in the simulation model, we have this baseline, and then no reduction in AVE of NTMs from 2023 to 2034. And we have this long-term simulation essentially because this is a tariff. These are NTMs and very difficult to change. So we have a gradual over time in a 10-year period where we adjust this NTMs. And this is not only difficult, it's controversial, yes. And then we made use of 4 simulations. 100% reduction, which is not really realistic because SPS is really important, and 25%, 50%, and 75%, 50, and 25. So we made various combinations of NTMs. You wouldn't, NEDA, UN in different rates of reduction, with and without feeds. Feeds, by the way, is very important because you cannot talk of these three commodities without feeds. Feeds. These are corn and animal feeds. Okay, if you want to reform these commodities, you need to look into the inputs of these the production commodities. So we included corn, and then if you say, while the UN estimate is very high, and then animal feeds. Okay, so we actually made 120 simulations, okay? And out of that, we made use of the 0.5. So in my presentation, I will be using the 0.5 because we have a basis for that, which is the index that developed, and majority of the SPS is, NTMs are SPS. So that's the basis of our welfare analysis. And here are the effects, okay? The first, of course, there's the variable, and then so if you have a baseline, okay, it's a baseline without any adjustment in NTMs, another simulation which is with NTMs, and then compute every year between these two simulations, you get the effect of the reduction of NTMs. For swine meat, so these three commodities are insignificant actually compared to the rest of the economy. So in fact, the inflation is in the right direction, which it will decrease inflation, general price effect, but it's very small because it's a small component of total basket of commodities. But if you look at imports, the imports would come in is for swine meat 8.5%, and chicken meat 0.07, essentially because in NEDA's estimate is very small, the NTM, and fish is relatively higher. And here, this is part of the welfare effect. The demand for chicken in the domestic market would increase, okay? And that's a source of protein, okay? And output, unfortunately, for swine sector would decline because of the displacement effect of imports coming in. But for chicken and fish, this is what we found in the simulation, it's positive. And it's because these two sectors are actually exporting. When you introduce corn, reduction of corn, because of reduction in NTMs and corn and animal feeds, chicken and fish would become competitive. So export would kick in and then offset the negative effect on these sectors. So the welfare effect, this is the bottom line of the study, which is computing for the impact on welfare. Okay, and then these are the numbers which I'll talk in detail later. So, and the poverty effects is, of course, poverty reducing. So this is for swine meat. The total welfare effect, this is in the end of the year, is 2032, is about 20 billion pesos or 19.5 billion pesos. And if you look at the absolute level for household Q1, the quintile, so 2.5 billion, and the absolute. And then if you look at the, for the highest income group, is 5.3 billion. But if you compare that to the total expenditure of these groups, it's really progressive, okay? So decline in the price of this commodity, swine meat, because of the reform in NTMs is a progressive. It would favorably affect the lower income groups in terms of the absolute value of their consumption for that group and then for the, relative to their total consumption. Similar picture can be depicted or can be seen in this chart for chicken meat. Okay, again, in terms of absolute value, the highest group would have some biggest, but then in terms of relative to their expenditure, again, it's progressive. Okay, this is for chicken meat. For fish, more or less similar, but different values. Okay, so the lesson from here, from this, in fact, some of these NTMs, we established that this is 0.5, 50%, they are trade distortive, and it affects prices, commodity prices. Now this is a very nice part of the framework, and I really learned a lot from this part. The regulatory impact assessment. This is actually a discussion with key government agencies and private sector. And then in here, we review the existing laws and measures. So this is critical because I'll be pointing some loopholes here. So we reviewed the 2013 Food Safety Act, that's RA 10611, and then the implementing IRR, which is the R of the 10611, and then this one, okay? See, if you look at the sequence of the years when it's implemented, this DA, Department Order 1 Series of 15, which did not actually see light, okay? The DA implementing rules of trade enabling risk management system of SPS operations. And then in here, there's a recent law on Custom Modernization and Tariff Act. We also did that. And here in this RIA, we look at experiences of other countries and compare it with the Philippines. And we look into New Zealand, Japan, and Thailand. And then I want to emphasize Thailand because it's really, in terms of being able to produce food, processed food, this country is really successful. If you look at the supermarket in the US, and if you compare Philippine products and Thai products, you would be tempted to buy Thai product because of the packaging. And then best practices of, review of best practices. Lessons from WTO, these from the review of country experience of SPS agreement. Okay, now, this is the first. We have this, a lot of issues that we covered. In fact, we have a discussion note, by the way, here, a short. The technical report is very long because we generated 120 simulations. And then we have a discussion notes that would summarize all these insights from this study. Okay, so importers, and Mr. Cham here would attest to this, importers to go through BOC before DA and DOH, okay? But this is a violation. Food Safety Act, Article 4, Section 12, Paragraph B, and also in the IRR, Article 4, Section 12. The inspection of the DA and DOH shall take place prior to the assessment of tariff and charges of the BOC. But then you have the 2017 Act, okay? Importation, Chapter 3, 107, Section 108. Importation begins with when carrying vessel and aircraft enter the Philippine territory with the intention to unload therein. And then importation is determined when, okay? Tariffs and taxes and other charges due upon the goods have been paid or secured to be paid at the port of entry. So these two conflicting laws, see, it's a bit messy actually. The NTMs here in the country is a bit messy because of conflicting laws, the existing laws. This is very important, and we reviewed some of the experience of our countries. We have here 100% inspection at the border of all food items, okay? When we found out that resources needed to implement this is really inadequate in terms of qualified staff, inadequate budget in government, in agencies involved. But if you look at the IRR, Article 4, Section 12B, it says, arriving shipments may or may not require physical inspection based on its risk categorization of high risk, medium risk, and low risk. And another section, risk categorization of shall guide the DA and the DOH in the conduct of inspection and testing. The DA shall classify food items and their operation as high risk. And this is really critical because if 100% is very expensive, and if it's expensive, it's added on to the price, and then price of the good, and then who would suffer? The lower income groups. And this is another some loopholes in the law. Okay, separation of institutional buyers of fish and products from retailers in the wet market, not consistent with the current law. Achieve economic growth development by promoting fair trade practices and sound regulatory foundation for domestic international trade. Okay, and then in fact in the BAE legal framework, it's actually based on the 1930 law. So you need to update this. And then we found out, this is one of the recent interviews that we had with some officers in DA. We found out that there is really weak coordination with DA and FDA in the first border. And then we found out that DA does not have enough manpower to do the first inspection. But we have this Food Safety Regulation Coordination Board that should address this. But so we thought that we need to activate all these agencies. So if the Food Safety Act and the 2015 IRR, if you look at these laws, it's really the risk-based approach plays a prominent role. But then you have the 2015, which I cited a while ago, this, the implementation of risk assessment. It did not actually see light of the day. For no good reason, this department was not implemented during the change in the administration in 2016. Therefore, there's an urgent need to revive and implement this risk-based. This being used in other countries. If you use the 100%, it's really very costly. So, based on SPS experience in other countries, risk-based is really a good system. It allows close coordination between government agencies and food operators. Efficient review of process is critical. Process of requirements, permits, and licenses. Guides the removal of redundant measures. Okay? And then it streamlines the burdensome complex procedure in order to promote trade. And I just want to cite the experience of Thailand. They have this regulatory bulletin committee and uses the database, okay, this database here, to remove redundant measures. And this is critical also. It would help food operators to be SPS compliant, and therefore they can be exported to other countries of food. So these are the policy action plans that we, a number of them in the study, but this is, I just want to highlight this. Create a TWG to assess existing measures, and it is already ongoing. We are happy to report you that it is already ongoing. Operationalize single window, amend import segregation of fish, and then update the 1930 legal framework of the BAE, and then revive the discussion and institutionalize the risk-based approach, and create this is critical. And we were just discussing with Director Jerome on this very important national profile, okay? Activate the Food Safety Regulation Coordinate Board. And this is kind of funny. This is required, the last, accelerate this CIFA, okay? And it's being implemented in Angat, Bulacan, and being implemented in Toledo, Cebu, in Davao, and needs to be expanded to Subic and Batangas. But I have some, again, another issues on this Angat. Look at the map. Angat is really very far from the ports. Why put it there? Okay. So policy insights, reform the NTMs on other, okay, this is critical because these would also affect other food items. Reform NTMs on other food items. They are also critical, okay, to address this recurring food crisis in the country. Unless distortion in the incentive system are addressed and productivity enhancing measures are fully implemented, food trade is key to this food gap. And restrictive NTMs would really create artificial food crisis, sustain high food prices, lucrative incentive to hoard and smuggle, may incentivize corruption, which leads to higher cost of production in food. And then who will pay the price? The low-income group will pay the heaviest price. This is what we have. The blue line is the growth of agriculture, the blue line. And then the red line, the orange line, is the growth of the population. It's only in 2017 where you have a higher growth in agriculture relative to the population, the demand. Look at the gap. There is a gap. So you cannot get this food from above, but you have to get it from other borders. And then restricting it would create an artificial barriers and artificial food crisis. And then who would pay? Here, I repeated this slide. The lower income groups would pay the prices. I'm here in the podium, I have the mic. I have my own personal view as a researcher, okay? Farmers and food operators are rational, okay? They respond to incentives. They respond to incentives. They respond to proper incentives. If incentives are distorted, they accordingly respond too. But the current food NTMs is really a mess. If you compare the existing laws. For the sake of the low income, we need to fix the system. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Cesar. So yes, we say that I hope that you find the results interesting, and for those who are really interested, you may also raise your questions later after we have our two reactions from government and private sector. But let me just add quickly to the presentation. The presentation on the restrictiveness index actually essentially says that you have government and private sector actually in agreement as to which NTMs are considered more restrictive. So I think that's good news, because that would provide the basis for where to start, in terms of what to review, what to do. And well, we would say that the results of the welfare impacts essentially would provide some science-based or justification for reviewing and putting in serious efforts and energizing or how do you say that, establishing those TWGs at the DA, and probably more cooperation, coordination among the relevant agencies. Okay, so let me now call on, so let's hear the views of our government representatives. So Director Jerome Muni, please.
Good afternoon to everyone. So I'm lucky that I'm the second presenter after lunch. Anyway, I don't want to go further than that. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank the organizer of this meeting for inviting the Department of Agriculture, and on behalf of Undersecretary Mercedita Sombilia, the Undersecretary for Policy Planning and Regulations. She could not come today. So she asked me, and I wonder why. So, but this issue is, I have both personal and official interest here, because before joining I've been in government for more than 20 years, and I started with the Department of Agriculture, and I was with policy then. And the same issues we were discussing more than 25 years ago. So, but it's, I think the first reaction is congratulations to NEDA and also to the consulting team who developed this CGO model just to estimate the cost of, I would say, regulation. No? But let me point at the beginning that we're not here to say that regulation is not necessary. I think I would like to point out that we respect the call for good regulatory practice. So the word regulation is still there. And a lot of a lot of you would agree that regulation is needed as we liberalize, as we democratize economy and society. So regulation is critical. And I could not comment really on the many specific elements. No, I'm sure Professor Curaraton has been really an agricultural researcher. I could still read her work since I was younger. No? So he's really competent, and his team on this. No? But the point here is we need to develop benchmark. You know, when you talk about NTMs, a multitude of regulations, and most of which are border control regulations. So the question is why do we do border controls? And I think I will just point out 3 elements here that is in the recommendation. And I think there's a recognition that we need to how to balance between regulation that address legitimate objectives, for example, sanitary and phytosanitary requirements. No? Just imagine if we were all pigs and we could be infected by COVID-19, would it matter if there's economic costs, whether we would restrict someone with COVID-19 or without? Sorry for making that an example, because we're talking about animals here. We're not animals. So just because a lot of here are from the academics as well, and some of you, for example, it's very difficult for government to say that, okay, we just allow pork from anywhere to come into the country for the sake of, let's say, because it's cheaper to import from infected countries with African swine fever. So imagine if they would bring in and then infect our own industry. There's also economic costs. And I'm sure Professor Curaraton already made some estimation as well as to, assuming you import something that is infected with dreaded diseases. So how much is the cost that in terms of employment, income, livelihood, etc., etc. So there is always a balancing act when you do regulation. But of course, when it comes to SPS, you do not just, it's just because we want to impose this. There's legitimacy, there's an international benchmark, and it's governed internationally. So in terms of animals, regulation on food safety and animal health, I would say that as far as the Department of Agriculture or the country is concerned, we benchmark our regulations based on international standards because we have obligations and rights under WTO, and when it comes to animal health diseases, we follow they call it OIE because it's a French word, it's the international organization. And if it's for food safety, we follow the codex, no? But of course, it's not about the regulation per se. In fact, we have a lot of good regulations. Sometimes it's on the operational side, no? How fast, it's not very straightforward, no? But we respect the call for improvement. And on a daily basis, with the leadership of Yusek Sombila, and now we have also the secretary who is not only pro food production. We welcome importation as part of our food security strategy. So please don't get me wrong that the Department of Agriculture, if NEDA is not pro-importation, we are not also, the same manner, we're not also only pro-production. We also consider imports as part of our national food strategy for the country. No? So that's all I wanted to say on the SPS side. It's if you could reflect on the COVID-19 and just allowing without regulation, then it's self-explanatory. No? But we agree that we need to streamline. We need to make it more transparent. So computerization is very important. Publication of regulation is important. Steps and procedures are important. Communication is important. So that's what I wanted to say on that. On the aspect of other non-tariff measures, siguro the same lang din ang message namin. No? We cannot really, the NTMs are made not because this is a practice of only of the Philippines. This is a way of life of all global governance, national governance, to protect health and safety, to ensure standards on on the products or food that we bring in. These are all legitimate. And the call for the so-called distortion, I just wanted to point out that, or maybe just to clarify that the distortion that we're trying to address those are those processes that are unnecessary, unnecessary procedures, unnecessary requirements, no? But at least based on my experience in Geneva, because I was in Geneva for 12 years, I had the experience to know how all governments, members of WTO, implement their NTMs. And I'm very confident, although we have the UNCTAD study, I'm very confident that in the NTMs committee and the SPS committee, while we are a major importer on a lot of things, we are part of the least problematic countries in terms of trying to allow imports to come in. So with my 12 years experience there, I'm sorry, I'm trained to defend government policy, but my experience then would suggest, and if you look at also the reports of the WTO SPS Committee Secretariat, the Philippines is among those that have been aligned their regulations based on international standards. And I will give you an example. Not really, it is SPS, but it has nothing to do with procedures. For example, we are the second largest exporters of banana, and our bananas have been a source of good nutrients and food security for lots of countries. But some of our neighbors decided just to ban it on the guise of SPS. So what I'm saying is you're not even thinking about procedures. SPS could be used as a barrier to trade, no? But we're not discussing it here. We're not saying that we're not allowing things to be imported. What we're saying is only that regulations in terms of SPS must need to be only for those that are necessary procedures. And the reason why the Philippines has a lot of border measure, at least on the Department of Agriculture, is actually in the agricultural field, there is always science of production, there is always science on diseases, foodborne illnesses. By the time it's produced clean, by the time it's transported to make sure it's clean or to make sure it's not infected or contaminated, is a very multifaceted concern of government. So normally countries that I'm telling you about, for example, we have been asking the European Union for our export of corned beef. It's 3 decades already. They have not accredited us because of SPS concern. Meaning your pure foods that you like, for example, sorry for the advertisement, it cannot enter the export market. So what I was saying is that we are not at that level, but we need these regulations to make sure that the health and safety of the products that we bring in, and does not also affect the industry. Because for everything that we do, there's always welfare loss and welfare gain. And there's always economic opportunity loss and economic opportunity gain. So it's always in policy, it's very difficult really to balance all of this. And we always want to find the equilibrium. Unfortunately, the equilibrium is very subjective. Subjective to leaders, subjective to policy directions, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing is for sure, the Department of Agriculture is aligned with the direction of the study that we need to remove unnecessary restrictions. So with that, I'll just go back to Ms. Vidacencio, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Bunyi. We're glad to hear of the DA's views, and that basically agreeing to the results of the study. And now may I call on Mr. Jess Chang.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have to catch my breath and take it a bit slow.
I had a severe bout of COVID-19, and my lungs had been damaged, so I have to take it a little bit easier, so please bear with me. Well, first of all, congratulations to the team for presenting, making such a good report and presentation. We can see that the liberalization of imports would definitely help the poor. You notice that the lowest decile spent 59% for food. And whenever we talk about that, I would always add a rejoinder, and yet they are still hungry. So imagine if you spend 60% of your income on food, and you are still hungry. You know, that's a big, big deal. Big, big deal. My association was organized in 1993, so we're now about 31 years old. And as Jerome has said, you know, we are talking about the same issues from 30, 25 years ago. And the reason is we never progressed. My association was formed in 1993, and in 1996 we started imports of beef, pork, and chicken. That was, 1996 was the year the Philippines started with the WTO Uruguay round and liberalized importation. Unfortunately, everything stopped at that point. So 30 years, it was supposed to have further liberalization after 10 years, but it never happened. So we remained in 2005. So it's like 18 years later, they were still stuck there. The policies of government is that they want to promote production, and they see importation as a deterrent to production. But that is not the case, because the importation will spur local producers to become more competitive. And when they become more competitive, then we are able to export, and the imports will die a natural death. Traders like us, importers, we don't care, you know. They say the peso, the value of a peso is the same, whether it comes from abroad or it comes locally, it's the same value. If we can trade something, we will trade something. We can buy local products if they want to work with us. That's fine. We don't care, actually. The important thing is we want to trade, we want to run a business, and I think basically that's what everybody's after. They want to have a source of livelihood. The problem with this government for many years is that it has abandoned science. It has abandoned science. We talk about SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary concerns, yes, but then 100% inspection of everything? I mean, that's crazy. I'll tell you one thing. You know, why do we apply for an SPS import permit or clearance? So we apply for a clearance, and then the products that we import have a document called the International Health Certificate. The International Health Certificate is issued by the government of the exporting country, attesting to the wholesomeness and safety of the products. All right? Yet, when this document is presented, it is questioned because we don't know. But why don't you know? It's like after this experience with COVID, before I can go to another country, I have to certify, get a certificate that I have been vaccinated. Imagine if everybody who comes to the Philippines would present a certificate of vaccination and say, yeah, but we don't know, we're not sure. Then I say, then you are not being scientific, you are being speculative. So we have abandoned science, that's the problem. So we need to have proper measures, SPS measures, of course. We are concerned with food safety, we are concerned with animal health, but we cannot go overboard and say, well, I don't know. Of course we know. There have been no incidents, no reported incidents of no problems, no breakdown in the refrigeration equipment, no outbreaks of diseases, and yet we say we can't trust the certificate. And I guess perhaps in a way it is because the Philippines
we don't trust our certificates because they can be made in recto or something like that, right? We are not a strong state. We are not a strong state, and perhaps the fact that we are a weak state makes us suspicious of the certifications that have been issued by strong states. So that is one of the proposals that actually we had brought forward to the department and say, well, that should be a factor in when we make a risk assessment, a risk-based analysis of whether this country is high risk or medium risk or low risk. So we have to get back to the science. Now, I won't, probably now because we are talking more of SPS, so I won't say much more on that. With regard to the last statement about the common examination facility, so we need to have, as we said, we need to have a science-based system, and a science-based system means that you don't really need 100% inspection. You need to be able to assess. So actually, a common examination facility is, in a way, yeah, it works, but then it should be run properly. So if we implement all of these things, if we change our system, we should be able to expect more availability of food, more variety of food, more affordability of food, and that will increase everything because, you know, imagine you're a tourist. You know, certain tourists don't want to go to the Muslim countries because they cannot have wine or beer. So people also come to have dining experiences. We don't have Peking ducks. All the Peking ducks most of the Peking ducks that you consume in the restaurants, how did they come in? You know, they swam over and they were slaughtered perhaps, right? Okay. So, I mean, and then, for example, the ASF thing, for example, ASF, now we will not allow pork from ASF countries to come to the Philippines because we are concerned that it may bring disease. But like my example a while ago, this country has COVID, yet we still allow their tourists to come in because they are certified as vaccinated, as healthy. So why do we restrict ourselves, cut off our supplies so that we don't have enough pork, we don't have availability? And even locally, you know, we cannot ship pork to Cebu, we cannot ship pork to Iloilo, Mindanao, whether local, whether imported. Why? Because the LGU says no, or DA says no, when the products could be certified as ASF-free, disease-free, et cetera, So why do we do that? So we really need to do a lot of work and rationalize and get back to science. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cham. And yes, it's sad to hear that, you know, we had been talking about this since the late 1990s. And so hopefully this time around, you know, government will be able to, you know, push that the reforms needed, no? And especially in making more efficient the implementation, as well as I think, you know, worth reviewing some of the policies which may really be necessary or which are deemed restrictive or very restrictive. So with that, we are given up to 2:10. So we have a bit of time for questions from the floor. Yes. Yes, please. Roel. Sorry. You're second.
Yes.
Yes, sir, please, go ahead.
Don Agustin, I'm a farmer. May I address my question to the Department of DA? What is your response to Mr. Cham's concern, please?
Did you hear that? Sir,
What is your response to the concern of Mr. Cham on the various restrictions mentioned? Thank you very much.
Sir, mukhang ikaw yung nakasala. Director.
No, hello.
Oh, I really like dialogue with stakeholders. I grew up in the department always talking with stakeholders. Unfortunately, stakeholders, you're not unified on a lot of things. But in any case, I don't want to put it as restrictions per se, but what we admit is that we need the regulation, and the way we implement regulation should be something that is, if we could minimize it in such a way that is the most minimal, optimal, that also meets the objective. No? There is no one saying here in the room that we do not impose measure or regulations on products that just coming in. It's a day-to-day thing that you need that your products is not only beautiful and delicious, it's supposed to be safe, okay? And if you want to import meat, just like what Mr. Jescham has been a pillar of the Department of Agriculture consultation mechanism, I'm sure that he is very knowledgeable, and I learned a lot from him, but we never consider imports really as an issue. So we are not really restricting per se. Perhaps the issue there is there are written policies. Sometimes implementers do it differently. I think the research that Mr. Correraton Group had done outline. For example, consumer access that health and safety purse checks before taxes collection. And then you have a customs modernization saying the other way around. It creates already confusion. And if you create confusion, I don't want to say anything, but a lot of things could happen. It could delay your shipment in general. So, so I cannot speak for other government agencies. So these are the things, even to me, is unacceptable. And even my secretary, of course, would say that this is not acceptable because we're not even discussing health and safety here per se. It's just who's going to do it first. It's a confusion. That creates cost, that creates delays, et cetera, et cetera. So I do not agree that the regulation per se is meant to restrict trade. The regulations are put in place to address other issues rather than purely economics, health, safety, quality, pricing, fraud. There are many things that are objectives of society and government that needs to be addressed through regulation. The issue here, how do you then implement regulation? Let's say, for example, the import permit, I think that openly called, but it's actually not an import permit, but it's called a health certificate on importation. I think Mr. Jescham highlighted that why do we need to have an import clearance for SPS matter when the exporting country already said that it's clean, it's safe? You know about fake news. So it's also a common practice that shipments, I would think that 99% of the time, perhaps it's authentic, no? But in the first place, before you comply, you need to know the regulation. How can, for example, the source of chicken, for example, from Italy, who has avian flu, for example, if we will not require a regulation that says if you want to import chicken from Italy who's infected by these dreaded diseases, will not import something that is infected or contaminated. Okay? We're not even looking only of health. For a lot of countries who are very strict about food safety, even the contaminants, even the heavy metals, even the pesticides, even the residue of the veterinary medicine that put into the chicken, for example. They need to know before you can enter. These are the kinds of things that these are legitimate government concerns because it is for the good of the people, of the citizen. It's to protect your health and safety. So that I will just repeat on saying this. there is always a case for review of regulation, try to minimize it, but we will not accept the fact that these regulations are illegitimate. So this is, I think, the messaging should be, these regulations are legitimate. Let's remove those processes trying to achieve these objectives. That is unnecessary. That is not good for business. That is not good for consumers. And that's not good for farming communities, etc. So unfortunately, there is no straightforward answer to that. So what government can always offer is we're open to dialogue. Mr. Cham's group, always in dialogue with us. Sometimes he is happy, sometimes he gets frustrated, but that's part of life because we need to balance a lot of things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Monique. Can we have Ruel and then Alex? Ruel first? Yes, Ruel.
Yeah, good afternoon, Roel Briones, Philippine Institute for Development Studies. I have a bit of history with this study. I believe I reviewed the inception or first draft of this. And I'm happy to note that basically all of my initial comments have been addressed. So what you'll find here is a fairly polished and refined work. So I have actually nothing much to add dun sa technical content, but I'd like to just reinforce. These figures are not small figures, 19 billion, etc. Our 4Ps is 111 billion. So this is like a little less than 20% of our big our flagship social safety net project. And we can get this by simply, not even spending 20 billion. We spend a few hundred million, but we do the proper regulatory regime. And if we need, invest in laboratories so that we could also fight science with science. If we find the regulations abroad or somebody questions our own regulations, we have the science to back it up. But Mr. Cham, I think, mentioned something important. We seem to have neglected the science. I would argue that the reason is simple. We simply are hostile to imports. That's it. It's a naked protectionism masquerading as sanitary and phytosanitary and health and safety. Look, in 1991, we passed the Magna Carta of small farmers, and it was hailed as a victory for agriculture. You know what Magna Carta is, that law? It basically banned all imports unless the Secretary of Agriculture said otherwise. So imagine we were basically autarky if we followed the provision of that law. And I think a lot of the sentiment that drove the passage of that law is still in us. So we have 100%. We were wondering, it's not scientifically necessary to have 100%. But if you understand that there's actually a hostile attitude towards imports, then you can understand, actually, it's that motivation. We would like to err on the side of caution rather than err on the side of, economic value. So we want, kasi if you look at the agreement on SPS, it says there, don't implement measures that are more trade restricting than what is necessary to implement your scientific guidelines on what is food health and food safety. So that said, I would just like to amplify that in addition to the economic benefits, there are also dynamic benefits in terms of, let's say, if you allow more importation, it not only challenges competitiveness of the existing. This is an input. So Mr. Cham knows this because meat imports is an input to the processed meat industry. So you could actually have that dynamic effects that is not necessarily captured by a CGE. So I would like to always point to the example of Vietnam. Vietnam has the lowest MFN tariffs for corn in the whole of Southeast Asia. And it has the biggest feed export industry in the whole of Southeast Asia. Coincidence? I don't think so. Plus, animal meat, fish and animal, they're the major source of protein. And still, Philippines is very high in terms of stunting and other wasting and other measures of acute protein energy malnutrition. So artificially raising the cost of these products has greater, I would say, untold cost than just saying 20 billion to the poorest group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruel. But let me just have the question of Alex before I give a chance to three speakers here to just say a few
Thank
more
you.
words, and then we will have a closing.
I
Yes, please.
echo Dr. Roel Briones' comments. I fully agree with him. But I'm sorry I didn't get the name of the DA representative. May I have your name again?
Director
Jerome po, Jerome.
Bonnier.
Jerome.
Si Mercedita Somvilla, yung aking USEC.
Yeah, because I want to challenge what you just said, that the constituencies are diverse. No, I downloaded the entire PDP 2023 to 2028, about 350 pages of it. More than 50 pages of which are just the listings of those who co-wrote it. Okay. In the first chapter says, the #1 goal of the plan is to make food affordable to the most number of citizens. So as far as that I am concerned, that should be the tree that we are barking on. So vis-a-vis that, when you're saying you're just focused on protecting the citizenry, that's only one tool, but not at the expense of, okay, case in point, yung SPS, the phytosanitary rules, have been captured by some of the cartels. And onions and the past crisis of the last 12 months have been examples of that. If the DA is supposed to be true to its mission of delivering food to the consumers, like we have 110 consumers versus how many farmers? 3-4 million. And the idea is to make it affordable, whether it's produced locally or imported. The job of the DA and all the other agencies is to make sure that the tariff or the other non-tariff measures are efficient so that those goods flow through and we get to have food on our table that is affordable. That is the real bottom line. The rest is just secondary. So if you're being self-referential, or you just refer to the regulations per se and review it, you should sort of benchmark that against, are you delivering affordable food to the table for the ordinary consumer? If you don't do that, I submit, with all due respect, that you are missing the point. Thank you. And to Cesar, nabitin ako dun sa conclusion mo. Sa haba-haba na sinabi mo, sabi mo, the NTM system is a mess and we should fix it. So anong dapat natin gawin to fix it?
Okay, thank you so much. Let me just quickly ask the three speakers here to just give your key message. Okay, and then very quickly, less than half a minute. Siya muna. Let me start with Jess, and then Jerome, and then Cesar.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the comments that we heard. Actually, there is something that is rarely mentioned, and that is what are the savings in our social costs if our people, our consumers, get better nutrition. Nobody asks this question. Instead, we say, okay, let's pass a generic medicine law so that the importation of medicine will be duty-free. But for food, no, we should tax it like crazy so that people will get sick and malnourished. But we can give them cheap medicine anyway. So nobody talks about these things. And we should really have a serious look at that. You know, we have, like I said, 60%. If you look at our demographics, the upper decile is so small, while the lower 9 deciles are huge. You know, it's not even a pyramid; it's an iceberg. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jess.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if we have the time really to address all those issues raised on the Department of Agriculture. But of course, a lot of you are economists. That's why you are here. If you rely all your food imported, I cannot explain what's the impact on employment. And get back to food security again, because if you would send the wrong signal to farmers, they would also not plant, and then you will rely more on imports. And by the way, we are the highest in terms of import penetration of food, not only in the region, in the world. 30% of what we eat is imported. So if we are not pro-importers, Why are we importing 30% of what we eat on a daily basis? So I think you have to look at the data. Second, there is also, if you would make economic valuation of everything, why don't we make an economic valuation of no regulation as well? So it's like a cryptocurrency as originally conceived. So I will not discuss it here. I think the Department of Agriculture, through me, is open to dialogue on how to make regulations at par with international standards that meets our legitimate objective and also that is good for business. We need to find that equilibrium. And we have been doing that. And although I admitted that since 30 years ago, 20, we were discussing it, but I disagree a bit that we have not done much. We have done much, a lot. In the past, import regulations are hardly unwritten. Most of the regulations in the last 15 years are written regulations. Imagine if regulations were not written. So every inspector, every authority would say, no, you need this, you need that. Yes. Now, be thankful that regulations are written. They are not perfect. Some are conflicting as presented. Some of them, they have different interpretation. Some of the regulations might be, let's see if they are really a necessary step or we can reduce the steps. These are the things that the government or the Department of Agriculture is open to dialogue and try to make it called having a good regulatory practice. Yeah. So we are partners. We're not, we are in the same boat. This is the Philippines. So, but as you know, we do not operate, although the research is general equilibrium, there are so many elements that are simultaneously going to happen. If you do this, what is the impact on the, you know, employment, prices, etc.
So thank you.
This is very multifaceted. As you know, this is not simplistic as let open the imports and everything is happy.
Thank you.
Nobody is thinking that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're not going to discuss how to operationalize implementation here, but let me just give Cesar a very brief moment to close, and we will have our president for the OIDCI to give the formal closing.
Thank you, Alex, for your comment. 2 points. One is, please reduce the conflict among these laws. Okay, the second, and do the science-based risk assessment, which is really dependent on the national profile database. And that's the source of transparent discussion of clear policy direction, implementation of these existing laws. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our excellent moderator and co-study team member, Dean Arlene Inocencio. The 61st Conference of the Philippine Economic Society highlighted insightful presentations and meaningful discussions on diverse but substantive topics that are meant to contribute to transforming the Philippine economy into a prosperous, resilient, and inclusive society. The Orient Integrated Development Consultants, OIDCI, is indeed privileged to be among the key sponsors of this very significant event, and we look forward to a continuing collaboration with the PES. Our distinguished speaker, Dr. Cesar Coraton, is the team leader of the OIDCI team that was commissioned by NEDA to undertake an assessment of the welfare impact of potentially trade-restrictive and non-tariff measures on key agricultural food commodities. In his narratives, Dr. Cesar elaborated on the simulation model that we have developed as basis for the welfare analysis. He articulated on the manner of determining the stringency index that was derived from the results of the series of focus group discussions and key informant interviews with government agencies and private sector groups. In his discourse, Dr. Cesar made emphasis on the conduct of the regulatory impact assessment, which provided the study team the perceived challenges faced by the government and private sector in the implementation of non-tariff measures, including the procedural and institutional constraint. He then presented the proposed policy action, including his own insights on necessary structural transformation and critical reforms in NTMs on food items to address the recurring food crisis in the country. Together with Dean Arlene, I also have been privileged to be a member of the OIDCI team as the institution and governance specialist. And I would like to express our sincere appreciation to our distinguished panel of discussants, Director Jerome Bunye, Policy Research Service of the Department of Agriculture, Mr. Jess Chan, President Emeritus, Meat Importers and Traders Association. Both Yusek Mercy Zombilia and Sir Jess were among the active participants in our focus group discussion and key informant interviews. Their inherent views, experience, and knowledge shared on the NTMs contributed to the substantive outcome of the study. Let me express our profound gratitude to the Office of Undersecretary Rose Edilion for the able guidance, and in particular the NEDA Agriculture and Natural Resources staff for their diligent support and assistance. And on behalf of OIDCI and the study team, I would like to express our heartfelt congratulations to Dr. Philip Arnold Tuanyo and the members of the Philippine Economic Society for the successful convening of the 61st Annual Meeting and Conference of the PES. Thank you very much, and a pleasant afternoon to everyone.